That to me is important. The second issue I want to talk to you about is the McGirt issue. I took my privilege as being the ranking member to educate you a little bit about it, and let me talk a little bit more. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, for the record, to include the Washington Post article that I distributed earlier.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And it gives you some understanding. And I preface this with the remark that, again, I'm certainly not disappointed with members of the Appropriations Committee. They didn't know very much about this. There's no reason why they should. And I'm not even too critical of the Biden administration, although I will point out in the Department of Justice bill, there's a request by the administration, which I supported. I actually submitted a letter in support of it, and I think all my other colleagues in the Oklahoma delegation did as well, where the administration asked for an additional $70 million to deal with extra U.S. attorneys, extra FBI agents, extra U.S. Marshals, all because of this single decision, McGirt. And again, the decision was, and it wasn't, while the tribes supported it, they did not go to court. These are criminal justice cases that came through the 10th Circuit, which is the most experienced circuit on Indian issues in the United States, where some really smart criminal defense attorneys went back and did their research and said, you know, Congress never formally dissolved these reservations. And so for the purposes of criminal justice, they still exist, which means the state has no jurisdiction over Indians on an Indian reservation. The federal government certainly does. Tribal law enforcement certainly, officials certainly do. We've submitted to the committee and can submit here, and some of this is covered in the testimony, how many millions of extra dollars these 5 tribes are now spending. They're not spending it next year. This, you know, the case took effect immediately, and it's had a domino effect in terms of the appeals being generated and what have you. So they are laying out millions of dollars now that weren't in their budget. That's money that comes from social services, healthcare services, other things. They're deadly serious about protecting not just their citizens, but the non-natives who are now living on these reservations that they didn't realize still in this singular area had this. So there's clearly, if there is a federal trust responsibility to provide for you know, justice and law enforcement on Indian reservations. The administration clearly recognizes that by asking for extra money in this very unusual set in the DOJ. They just didn't ask the tribes. And so that's a pretty common pattern in American history. And I've actually told some of my friends in tribal governments that are arguing that they want to be fully funded, I said, I agree with you, and I'll go and make the argument for you. But since the federal government's never appropriately fully funded law enforcement on Indian reservations in 200 years, don't expect them to get it right the very first time up here. So we also have a legislative remedy, although that's not before us today, and there's controversy about that. I wouldn't suggest everybody agrees with what I think is the right approach there. But where there is no disagreement, no matter where you are on the McGirt decision or any legislative remedy, everybody agrees the federal government and the tribal governments need more money for law enforcement, you know, because of something that they did not anticipate a year ago. So with that, I would just urge the adoption of both amendments and be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.